welcome to our community, and good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, let's try it again. Good morning.
Good morning.
So just a quick reminder, I see everyone has their masks on. Awesome. So just a reminder that except for folks performing, we are maintaining our mask requirement throughout the service. So it doesn't look like that's a problem, but that's just a friendly reminder for you. So, as always, we begin with an affirmation for peace in the Middle East, which we say each week in solidarity with our Muslim and Jewish brothers and sisters, all of us people of the book. And so we greet one another. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Peace be upon you.
Upon you, peace.
Shalom aleichem.
Alaikum shalom.
Well, as you know, I am Reverend Michelle Vargas, and it is my joy and honor to welcome you this morning to Unity of Monterey Bay, a beloved community co-created with love and intention. So whether you're here with us in person or you're joining us virtually, we know that in truth, love knows no boundaries and that we are one in spirit. So let us begin by affirming together. Thank you, God, for this most amazing day. Miracle follows miracle, and wonders never cease. Unity of Monterey Bay is an inclusive spiritual community committed to co-creating an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just, and compassionate human presence on this planet. We celebrate our oneness, and we honor the God of each of our understanding. And we affirm that innate good and divine essence within each and every individual. So will you please join me now in our statement of faith? There is only one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, expressing as infinite God beyond us, intimate God beside us, inner God being us, divine love in action. And so it is. So we're going to begin now with a moment of prayer. And as we move into this time of prayer, I'd like to share with you just a portion from a poem by Unity's poet laureate, James Dillett Freeman, called The Traveler. Our life did not begin with birth. It is not of the earth. And this that we call death, it is no more than the opening and closing of a door. And in your house, how many rooms must be beyond this one where we rest momentarily? Dear Lord, I thank you for the faith that frees, the love that knows it cannot lose its own, the love that looking through the shadows sees that you and he and we are ever one. And so as we prepare for this special day of the dead service this morning, this special time of remembering those we have loved and lost, those who've moved on to new realms that we do not totally understand, we open our hearts wide to feel the sadness and the grief as we share together this common human experience of loss. And so we are grateful for that faith that frees, that faith that we have in God's love and God's goodness that frees us from our fear. We are grateful for the knowing that in truth, consciousness is eternal, that somehow life goes on. And while the physical bodies of our loved ones may no longer be with us, we know that the love we have for them lives on in us as we remember them. And so in the name and through the power of that great love that lives us all, that is infinite, unbounded, and everlasting, we say, Amen. And so it is.
So it is.
This is the time in our service when we bless our children. I see one wee one, but it's not a human child. Should we bless the doggy child? She'll take a blessing.
Oh, hello.
Layla, right? Layla. Always makes me think of that Eric Clapton song. Layla. That's where she got her name. Well, we're going to bless you, little sweet Layla. So holding in our hearts all of the beloved children of our community and of our families, and indeed all of the children around the world, and all of the fur children that I know there are many in this community that we love so much. So we bless you. We love you. We bless you. We appreciate you just the way you are. This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. She looked like she was perfectly happy to be up here representing all the wee ones. So we take some moments now to center ourselves again and deepen our blissful inner connection with Spirit. So taking a deep breath in and letting it out with an audible sigh. We allow all distractions to gently fade away as we invite the chime to call us into this sacred space within. We ring the chime 4 times to call in the 4 directions and to remind us of our interconnection with all of creation and with the sacred circle of life. As we feel it resonate through our very beings, we follow its call into this now present moment within. Continuing to focus on our breath, with each inhale, we open our hearts and minds. We envision our breath reaching every cell of our being. And with each exhale, we see all barriers and obstacles dissolving into the divine flow. And again, as we inhale, we expand the spaciousness within us. We move beyond the limitations and boundaries of our bodies. And as we exhale, we ground ourselves deep within Mother Earth and into our oneness with the universe. Finally, we breathe our awareness into the highest expression of love, light, joy, and peace we can imagine. And as we experience a transforming wave of gratitude with a fullness of heart, we say yes to it all, embracing, claiming, and knowing the divine Christ Spirit expressing in, through, and as us. And with a final exhale, we say, thank you, God. So now fully centered and transformed by the power of Spirit, we enter into our lesson and meditation time with today's daily word.
We read from Daily Word for tomorrow, November 1st, shared with permission of Unity, publisher of Daily Word, that can also be found at dailyword.com. And the word is memories. I invite you to allow my words to be your words. I am grateful for my memories. Today I remember the dear souls who have enriched my life through their unique contributions. I am grateful for memories of precious experiences and heart connections. Even though I have relatives and friends who have passed from earthly life, their love and presence still live in my heart. Connections I've made through the years make life rich and fulfilling. Some memories may bring a tear, while others may bring a smile or even a laugh. No matter which memories arise, I honor and nurture myself as I reflect upon them. I am grateful for my treasured memories and for all the people whose love, wisdom, support, and guidance have shared me. Each one has helped me become who I am. And from the scriptures, I thank my God every time I remember you. Philippians chapter 1, verse 3.
I am that I am has brought me to this now moment. Here I am. I am that I am has brought me to this now moment. Here I am to be the voice and to be the heart through which heaven is made known on earth. To be the voice and to be the heart through which heaven is made known on earth. I am that I am. 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 I am.
In witness to the wisdom of the many paths to the sacred, we read from 3 sacred traditions on this morning's topic, death and honoring our loved ones. From the Native American religions, someday the great chief above will overturn the mountains and the rocks. Then the spirits that once lived in the bones buried there will go back into them. At present, those spirits live in the tops of the mountains, watching their children on earth and waiting for the great change which is to come. The voices of these spirits can be heard in the mountains at all times. Mourners who will wail for their dead hear spirit voices reply, and thus they know that their lost ones are always near. From African traditional religions, those who are dead are never gone. They are there in the thickening shadow. The dead are not under the earth. They are there in the tree that rustles. They are in the wood that groans. They are in the water that runs. They are in the water that sleeps. They are in the hut. They are in the crowd. The dead are not dead. Those who are dead are never gone. They are in the breast of the woman. They are in the child who is wailing, and in the firebrand that flames. The dead not under the earth. They are in the grasses that weep. They are in the whimpering rocks. They are in the forest. They are in the house. The dead are not dead. And from Judeo-Christianity, the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 7.
We're very spooky today. Remember me, though I have to say goodbye. Remember me. Don't let it make you cry, for even if I'm far away, I hold you in my heart. I sing a secret song to you each night we are apart. Remember me, though I have to travel far. Remember me,
each time you hear a sad guitar, know that I'm with you the only way that I can be, until you're in my arms again. Remember me. Recuérdame, si en tu mente vivo estoy, recuérdame. Mis sueños yo te doy, te llevo en mi corazón y te acompañaré, unidos en nuestra canción, contigo ahí estaré. Recuérdame, si sola crees estar, recuérdame, y mi cantar te irá a abrazar, aún en la distancia nunca vayas a olvidar que yo contigo siempre voy. Recuérdame. Remember me, for I will soon be gone. Remember me, and let the love we have live on, and know that I'm with you the only way that I can be. So until you're in my arms again, remember me.
Well, we have been spending the past month exploring the book, The Five Invitations, which, although it was written by Frank Ostaseski, who is a Zen Buddhist teacher, it has offered us practical, universal teachings for how an awareness of death can help us to learn to live our lives more fully. So these are the things that we have learned. Instead of fearing or avoiding or denying our own mortality, these teachings have invited us to embrace death as a natural and inevitable part of life, part of the ongoing cycle of life, and as an ever-present element in our own lives. In studying each of these five invitations, we've examined such things as the impermanence of life. We've allowed that truth of our own mortality to help us to learn life more in the present, appreciating each and every moment of our precious and fleeting earthly existence. We've explored how we can learn to welcome everything in life, all of life's experiences, both good and bad, and to push away nothing, knowing that there are blessings inherent in every experience. We looked at how we can step into a greater experience of our own wholeness by leaving no part of ourselves behind. Learning to embrace, accept, include, and integrate even those parts of ourselves that we find troublesome or even unlovable. We've learned about the importance of cultivating a place of rest within ourselves, that experience of peacefulness and calm where we can have a reprieve from the mind's constant flow of thoughts, which is always creating fear and worry and anxiety. And finally, we explored the idea of don't know mind, that cultivating an attitude toward life that is open and receptive, where there is room for learning and room for growth and expansion, knowing that we don't know everything. So that rather than thinking that we know how everything should turn out, and rather than trying to control life to make things come out the way we want them to, we practice letting go of our fixed notions and adopting that beginner's mind. This openness allows us room also to seek divine guidance so that we are truly co-creating our lives with God. This has been quite a year. Well, I think it's safe to say almost 2 years now, year and a half. With the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, death has been more present in our lives more than ever before, right? I shared in our weekly e-blast a couple of weeks ago how in the city of Los Angeles in Grand Park, they have created a huge Day of the Dead installation, a huge basically altar, right, with people being invited to come and put their own photographs on it and to participate in this public and communal grieving of our collective loss resulting from COVID. And I shared this because it seems to me like such a great example of how we can look at cultural perspectives that might be different from our own and allow them to expand our own understanding. These altars in LA's Grand Park are such a beautiful example of allowing folks to honor their own traditions while also sharing them and allowing others to benefit from them, the larger community to learn and benefit from them. Seems like a pretty cool type of cultural sharing. And this is essentially what we've done here at UMB, beginning about 7 or 8 years ago when we began practicing Day of the Dead and this tradition. So I first learned about Day of the Dead when I was living in Mexico as a young person, and I had an opportunity to see firsthand and experience how Day of the Dead is celebrated. And I don't know, I was fascinated with this tradition from the very start, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about it. And so I really enjoyed learning about the Mexican perspective on death and how it is different from our typically American perspective. And I was attracted to the vibrancy and the color and the music, the artistic aspect of this tradition. And so as we're going to see and talk about today, Mexicans have a very different attitude towards death and different sensibilities around death and dying. You can see that by looking at our own beautiful altar, which is just so full of everyone's photographs today. I'm so happy. We can see that it's a very different sensibility around death. So it's my hope that as we learn a little bit about the Mexican Day of the Dead and the Mexican perspective on death, perhaps it can help us to shift the way we see death and our own mortality. Maybe coming to see death as something just a little less fearful, a little less anxiety-producing, and maybe seeing it more as a natural and normal part of the cycle of life. And then, as we engage in our annual tradition of lighting a candle to honor and remember our loved ones, my vision is that we are learning to grieve together. We're learning to share that experience of loss that we all have and that is part of our common humanity. Whenever we borrow rituals or traditions from another culture, it's extremely important that we give them the proper respect and reverence. And we can do this by first acknowledging that it's not, if for us it's not our own tradition, we can acknowledge that we are borrowing it from another tradition rather than appropriating it, right? And then it's important that we take time to understand the tradition, its background and its history, so that we are honoring it properly and with respect. In recent years, as you've noticed by our Dollar Tree scarves and all of the various skull things everywhere, Americans have become quite enamored of Day of the Dead. Even before Coco. Now, Coco just shot it through the stratosphere, right? We are seeing this sugar skull motif everywhere. I think this year even more than ever before. Target had a whole section on Day of the Dead. My fear is that for some folks at least, it may be more about how cute the colorful skulls are than it is about a true understanding of and respect for this ancient tradition. So that's why it's been one of my personal missions for years now to help educate people about the beautiful history of this holiday. So that's what we're going to do today. So Day of the Dead, or in Spanish, Dia de Muertos, it's not anything new. This is a very old tradition, centuries old, possibly even thousands of years old. And it dates back, at least in the short distance, to the ancient Aztecs, who had a thriving civilization in the central part of Mexico, beginning about 1300 CE, and continuing up until Cortez's arrival in Mexico in 1519 and the fall of the Aztec civilization in 1521. One of the things that I think makes Day of the Dead so intriguing is that it is a complete blend of religious beliefs and traditions. So the ancient indigenous cultures and then the Catholicism brought over by the Spanish conquistadors. When Cortez arrived in Mexico, I always feel it's so important to mention, he encountered an extremely complex and advanced civilization, one of the most thriving advanced civilizations on the planet at that time. The Aztecs called themselves Mexicas, and at the time of his arrival, they had pretty much come to dominate most of central Mexico. The ancient Aztecs already had festivals and rituals to honor death and to honor the dead during the harvest season. So when the Spaniards arrived and brought their Catholicism and the Catholic holidays of All Saints' Day, November 1st, and All Souls' Day, November 2nd, they were superimposed on top of the already existing Aztec traditions. During these days of the dead, because it's really more than one day, Mexicans traditionally have a belief that the veil between worlds is especially thin at this time. They believe that the souls of the dead are able to return to visit their living family members in their homes, businesses, and in their cemeteries during this time. Many Mexicans go to cemeteries and spend lots of time cleaning and decorating the graves. They bring food and drink, and there will be mariachis and dancing in the cemetery, which seems pretty strange to our American sensibilities, but quite beautiful. Traditional families build altars, or in Spanish, ofrendas, which is really correctly translated as an offering. It's an offering for the death, and this is what we have done in the back here. I want to tell you a little bit about the different elements of the altar and where they come from, because it all has a historical root going back to the Aztecs. First of all is the flor de cempasúchil, which is what we call marigold. These flowers, you're probably seeing them everywhere. I've been seeing them sold on the street corners. We bought some from a gentleman yesterday. The flowers with their bright color reminded the Aztecs of the sun, and the sun was extremely important for the Aztecs. They also have a strong scent, and the Aztecs believed that this strong scent would help the dead to find their way back. They also used copal, which is a type of incense, and they burned it, and which was also meant to help guide the souls. So often altars will contain a little cup of copal. Okay, now the sugar skulls that we see on everything, where did they come from? This is good, you guys. The Aztecs believed that the sun and the moon sort of engaged in this battle every night, right? And the sun needed strength and energy to rise in the morning. And so the Aztecs, who were an extremely advanced and admirable society, but they were also fierce warriors. They would go into battle with the intention of capturing prisoners of war that they would sacrifice, because their religious beliefs were that the sun needed human blood in order to rise again the next day. After the sacrifice, the skulls were kept as relics. They were cleaned and dried and displayed on racks. I know it sounds very bloodthirsty to us, but we have to remember this was their religion. These were religious beliefs. So that's where the skulls come from, right? And today, the skull still represents death, and Mexicans, as you can see and know, display many skulls during this time. It doesn't have the same morbidity that it has for us, that same macabre feeling. It's much more playful and fun. So in Mexico and in parts of Seaside even, you can buy candy sugar skulls, sometimes made of sugar or of chocolate. You can even buy one that has your name on it. Or if you have a not common name, there's a little place where you can write it on yourself. So again, that different sensibility of buying a skull with your name on it, right? The altars also obviously contain pictures of the loved ones who have passed, along with that person's favorite food and drink, mementos, things that belong to them, things to remember the person by, but also to help guide the dead back, right? So that they see their personal belongings. That's the tradition. There's also religious objects, brightly colored, the papel picado, which is the cutout paper that you see an example of back there. And then, of course, pan de muerto, which is the special bread that they prepare during this time. You can get them in any of the Mexican bakeries in Seaside right now. They're often created in the shape of bones or, the shape of a body with the bones sort of created on top with like a sugar kind of thing. So the Aztecs had a very different view of death. They saw life as circular. So death gave way to rebirth and death again. So death was just part of this natural cycle. It could even be said that for the Aztecs, life was the dream state and death was the true life. We see this in a quote that has been attributed to an Aztec king. He said, "We come only to sleep, only to dream. It is not true that we come to live on this earth. We become as spring weeds. We grow green and open the petals of our hearts. Our body is a plant in flower. It gives flowers and it dies away." So even after these two traditions melded, the Catholicism with the indigenous beliefs, the Mexican attitude toward death still reflects those ancient beliefs and retains so much of the Aztec understanding of death as a natural part of life. Mexicans, rather than avoid death, they like to face it head on. That's like buying that skull with your name on it. It's almost like a mocking, like, neener, neener, can't get me. I was actually on Pandora this morning. I put Day of the Dead, and what do you know? They had a Day of the Dead playlist. And I was listening to these songs as I was getting ready, and there was one that was literally teasing la calaca, which is like a symbol for death. It's like the skeleton. Like, come and get me, or you can't get me, or take the rich guys, not us poor folks. So it's just a very different attitude toward death. You often see in Mexican art a lot of skeletons pictured doing very human things. You've probably seen the skeleton bride and groom. Well, actually, they had that at Costco. They had that at Costco. I don't know if you saw it. But the skeleton bride and groom, skeletons riding bicycles, skeletons with big fancy hats. That whole portraying death as something very mundane. Even skeletons are riding bikes and doing these human things. And so death is seen as more of a continuation of life, more of a beginning than an ending. And again, we can see this reflected in a quote from the celebrated Mexican poet Octavio Paz. He said, "The word death is not pronounced in New York, in Paris, in London, because it burns the lips. The Mexican, in contrast, is familiar with death, jokes about it, caresses it, sleeps with it, celebrates it. It is one of his toys and his most steadfast love. True, there's perhaps as much fear in his attitude as in that of others, but at least death is not hidden away. He looks at its face." Americans typically have a very different sensibility regarding death. When we see death portrayed in art or in the media, it's often very macabre, right? Very violent, bloody, gory. If you think about the Halloween costumes and movies and the decorations that people put out, it's all very bloody and gory. And we typically avoid death as a topic. It's sort of a taboo, something that is hidden and that no one really wants to talk about. But as we've been exploring this month, avoiding the reality of our own mortality only increases our fear, right? Because we fear what's unknown, what we haven't taken the time to look at. And this can actually impede our grief process too. So by examining this Mexican perspective on death and adopting these practices like we have done here now every year for many years of Day of the Dead, can help us to begin to shift. It's very hard to change cultural sensibilities, but it can help us to expand a little bit and begin to look at death in a different way. Octavio Paz also said, a culture that denies death ends up denying life. And that's really what this month has been about, talking about, right? We don't want to deny life. We want to live more fully. And so by embracing an awareness of death and always being mindful of how fleeting our lives are, that can help us to live in the present and to value each day and not squander our precious time on things that are not important. As part of our general avoidance of the topic of death, our culture is also not very skilled at grieving. It's often seen as a very private thing. And while private grieving is important, there's also value to be found in communal ritual and in grieving together. I think we find that when we make ourselves vulnerable, what is revealed is our common humanity, right? We see that grief is something that we all experience. No one is exempt from this. And in that way, we can comfort one another. Adopting these Day of the Dead rituals where we honor and remember our loved ones each year can help us remember also that our loved ones are never gone. They've never left us. Their bodies may be gone, but we believe, at least in unity, that consciousness is eternal, and we believe that the spirit goes on in some way, even though we don't know exactly how. And so we can be comforted by that idea. I know we watched Coco on Friday night, a few of us here, and there's that moment at the end when they're celebrating Day of the Dead in the courtyard, and you can see the ancestors who appear as skeletons, and they're there dancing and eating and celebrating with them. It's very moving. It made me think about, oh, maybe my grandma's kind of right here all the time, hanging around me, So we can have that feeling that their spirits are always with us, and we know that the love we have for them is what goes on, right? That is never lost. And when we share our stories with our families, or in this case with one another, we keep our loved ones alive in our memories. That's kind of the whole idea of Day of the Dead, is keeping their memory alive. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to begin by sharing with one another, and I've invited a few folks to come up and just briefly share who they are remembering today and what it means to them. So, Colleen, would you like to go first? Somebody's got to go first.
I hope, good. Yeah, I'm turned up. Thank you. I'm here this morning to remember my mother, Marion Lee, who was an only child. And she had me when she was very young. She got married 2 weeks after she turned 17 and had me 2 weeks before she turned 18. She was a dancer, as you can see. She's with her partner, Dennis. And when she was very young, they traveled around. She was very proud that she and Dennis had danced at the Pump Room in Chicago and traveled all around the East Coast, entertaining people with their dancing. As a part of her dancing, she wore beautiful costumes, which as a young child, I wore often to play, dragging up behind me and everything, but I thought they were very glamorous, and I thought that was so much fun to play in my mother's costumes. She was not a very nurturing mother. She taught me how to clean a house. She wasn't a great cook, but she could make great fudge and fried chicken. The thing that my mother gave to me is movies. She took me to a movie when I was very little, in single digits. Every Saturday, we would go into town, and we would go to a double bill in the morning, go to Woolworths, sit at the counter, have a burger, and then go see another double bill in the afternoon. My reading material was Movieland magazine and things like that, and I just became totally entrenched in the movies, which I am to this day. My mother, from a young age, was a very heavy drinker. Somebody else in the family was that. She was a very heavy smoker. She smoked throughout her whole life, and as did everybody in my family. It was so common in that time when I was being raised in the 50s and 60s that people smoked a lot all the time. And that's, I hate to say this, but that's a memory that I hold probably most in the forefront of my mind, my mother and this addictive smoking that she did. And because of that, later in life, she had a quadruple bypass surgery. And they told her she should never smoke again. She came home from the hospital and lit up a cigarette. We had a lot of conversations about this because her health continued to deteriorate because of that. And she all of a sudden wanted to make a trip home to Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I was born, where she grew up, and to see all of her old friends. And since I was the only one that had traveled quite a bit, I was the one that got to take her home. And I told everybody, this will be her trip to Bountiful. She wants to go home and relive some of her past. And she didn't look good. She didn't look healthy. And so we went home. And I remembered a lot from my past that even though I'd left when I was 4 years old, I could remember certain things and remember certain people that we visited with. And we came home from there. She continued to smoke, and I realized this is kind of a sad thing to talk about, but anyhow, she just continued to get worse. She ended up in the hospital in a coma. And my sister took a lot of good care of her because she was right there in Riverside, and I went every Wednesday night from work, and then every weekend went there during the time that she was really ill. And we were in the hospital when she sat up out of this coma, opened her eyes, and looked totally at peace, lay back down, and she was gone. And I looked at my sister, she looked at me, and we both had this deep understanding that this was the end of our past. She was the last one. And we were raised by a family of women. My great-grandmother, they were all very married women. My great-grandmother was married 5 times. My grandmother was married 3 times. Twice. My mother was married 3 times. So my sister and I have been working really hard to sustain that tradition. I've been married 5 times. She's been married 4 times. Anyhow, we just looked at each other, and I realized in that very moment that me, was the family elder. And it was a sad time, a really sad time for us. But not just for my mother, it was for all the women that came before. And what we had learned from them, mostly my grandmother. And I like to remember my mother when I do remember her, as when she was young. That's when she was in her heyday. That's when she was a dancer, when she was beautiful and glamorous. And after that, she never really seemed to know how to nurture or take care of her children very well. And that fell to my grandmother. And I acknowledge her in many ways as being my real mom, and because she did take good care of me. But I think of my mom, sometimes I pull out these old pictures and look at her, and I think she had so much potential and so much beauty, and I feel badly for her, and I miss her. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. up is Robin.
So I have to admit, when I first got asked to do this, I was like, And I started going through my list of all those who I've lost. My first husband, my best friend of over 30 years, Mr. Schaefer. And then I got thinking, just in my family, my bloodline, I brought in a picture of my grandmother and my father, my dad's mom. And it got thinking, the anniversary of his passing was just this last month, and it hit me that it was 49 years ago. And I'm like, where have I come all these years? Because I was just a child when he passed. And I remember the loss, the emptiness, as I got through my teenage years, where's my dad? I had that big piece that was missing. And then through the last years, I've noticed thanks to Michelle and her lessons, I can bring back the memories. My father was the one that did the drinking in our family. So that kind of made a huge impact on my upbringing. But then again, I was like, well, that's who he was. Good, bad, indifferent. It contributed to his health issues. But it is still, they are who I am today. My daughter Victoria is the last Knowles in the family line. So I've been looking into where did my ancestors come from. With them both being gone, I don't have somebody who can answer those questions for me. The great-great-grandparents and the great-great-great-grandparents and what brought them to do the things they did. So this was a good opportunity for me to embrace. And I got to say, Dad, the anniversary this month was kind of hit me hard this year. And I'm not quite sure why still. But it also gave me the opportunity to embrace the love that I do remember as a child. Playing, riding my tricycle. I have no idea where these memories came from, but here they came. So I honor them today, along with so many others that I've lost along the way. And I use that term loosely. I haven't lost them, but I've lost their physical presence. They're still with me. They're in my heart. They're in my memories. And sometimes you have to take a moment and look at the blessings through the clouds, so to speak. So Mom and Grandma, I used to call Grandma Wheezy. Her name was Eloise. But Dad and Grandma, I love you. Thank you.
Okay.
I was kind of surprised that I wanted to do this, but I want to just take advantage of this time when perhaps the veil is thinner to honor and just speak to my parents. I was really mad at them for a lot of years. I was growing up wasn't easy all the time. But a few years ago, I was doing some forgiveness work towards myself and my parents and others, and just a wonderful gratitude came up for my parents, and it has remained with me, and it remains the stronger memory for me. Gratitude, they were first generation in our family. My grandparents both sides came from Poland. And I'm very grateful for my parents' willingness to face what they had to face, all the tough times and the breakthroughs that they made for themselves that laid the foundation for me and my life here. And so Mom and Dad, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everything.
Susan? Yeah. Susan? You? Oh, sorry.
So Michelle asked me to talk about George because he was a special guy, and probably a lot of you didn't know him that well. But he became very special to me. And Michelle had said that we should be talking about what that person meant to us. And what I want to do is talk about just 3 different little scenarios with him that showed how he taught me about myself. So I met George one Tuesday afternoon, sunny. He was basking on the steps outside the front porch. And I was down on the sidewalk, and I looked up, I saw this old, skinny man sitting there looking really frayed. Is that the right word? Not afraid. He was never afraid, but a little tattered. And he's just leaning forward on his knees, basking in the sun, and he had his tattered books with him. So I thought, oh, this looks really interesting. So I went up and talked to him, and as I got closer is when I really saw the frayed pants and messy hair, and I was convinced that he was a homeless man. But then he started talking, and he sounded extremely intelligent, very knowledgeable, and a little crazy. And I was like, I wasn't really sure if what he was saying really meant anything even to him, because there are a lot of words that came out. So that was my first introduction to him. And when I look back in my mind, I know that I saw I don't know how to explain it. I saw him looking really decrepit. And I can see that in my mind. But also now what I see in my mind is just a guy with khakis with frayed hem and an okay shirt that was probably wrinkled and needed a haircut. And he had frayed books. So I don't know what the truth is about what I saw. And what I realized with George that I came away with is learning more about myself as someone who judges instantly, often by just a pair of frayed pants. And I don't know, I hope everybody else does that to some extent. And I've been working on that for a long time. And my reaction at that point was so embedded immediately that he told me that he had just moved into the area, into a really nice new little apartment a block over from here. And that didn't compute for me. And so I forgot that detail until a while later. And he also told me that he was a licensed marriage and family counselor. And that didn't compute either. It just went right through my mind, and I'm conscious here. I'm really embarrassing myself for how I reacted to that. So another image that I have of him is downstairs with him laying on the sofa after he got sick with Alexander, and their heads were at opposite ends of the sofa and their legs kind of intertwined. And they were having a deep philosophical conversation, which you could not understand a word of it. And I don't know if they were really communicating. It looked like they were. They were deeply engrossed in conversation. And when I saw George doing that, he really loved Alexander. And he committed a lot of time to Alexander, who had difficulty communicating, even more so at that time. And George just was like, what's the problem? We just communicate. So he really was a loving man. And I thought at one point about him that a way to talk about George would be to say he followed no man, ever. And then later I realized that he did follow women. He'd been married, I don't know how many times, several times, and he talked a lot about the women he missed, the women that he was in love with now, and he fell in love with Vicky. And one time, and he used to run up to after the service to the circle to be able to hold her hand. and one of his motivations was to have a deep philosophical talk with her right then, right after church. And she wasn't inclined to do that at that moment. One time after church, he came running back to me and he said, "Susan, she squeezed my hand." But then he fell in love with Michelle. That's another story. Okay, so one last image of him is, remember the homeless guy on the front steps? Is him pulling up downstairs in his 1962 cherry red Ford Mustang convertible, bought new in mint condition. You see, he had his priorities. Pants? No. Car? Yes. And so he pulled up to the church, the top was down, and he and Alexander were sitting in there with sunglasses on, and they just looked so cool. And he got out of the car, and I went, holy moly, that guy is really buff. You know, he had a tight T-shirt on and his sunglasses, and he looked like a man. Actually looked like a man who would follow women. So, anyway, that was my lesson that I got in judging.
While Jan is making her way up here, I just wanted to share that when George was in the hospital, I would call him and I'd be like, "God, I'm so sorry you're still in there." He's like, "Are you kidding me? There's all these cute nurses coming in. They're bathing me, feeding me." He didn't want to leave the hospital because he was living it up. Oh, goodness.
Well, thank you for inviting me to share. I wanted to share about my mother-in-law, Audrey Jean. She died in October of 2019, and she was an incredibly strong woman and gentle, patient, a really beautiful soul. And she raised her 5 kids virtually on her own. When her husband left her, she taught herself how to drive, went back into the workforce, and really the 6 of them, she and her 5 kids, really struggled over the years, and she was just a very determined woman. She also was a woman of faith, and she was really devoted to her church, Bethany Presbyterian Church in Rochester, New York, and volunteered in many different ways in the community. She would help seniors every year complete their tax returns, and She was always finding ways to give back to the community. That was really important to her. And so she gave so much to her community. She gave so much raising her kids and raised 5 really amazing humans. I would always just, when I first met my husband, just remark at like what quality children she raised all on her own. It's just amazing to me how they're just really amazing human beings, all 5 of them. One of the things that made her sad, though, was that none of her kids have any kind of faith that roots them. So 7 years ago, when Caroline and I found unity, my daughter Caroline and I found unity, I was sharing that with her, and it made her really happy that Caroline and I had found a faith home. So she was someone who was always giving back to her kids, to her community, but she also loved to be cared for. And that's why I wanted to bring her here and have her be part of the altar, because I love that aspect of the altar of where you're honoring and you're also caring for your loved ones. And she loved to be cared for. She would love when my husband would come over to her house and hang a picture for her or get something off the high shelf that she couldn't reach, or maybe she could, but it was just nice to have him come and do it for her. So that's why I wanted to bring her here today and have her feel the love of all of us here and feel cared for by our community. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan. Thank you, all of you who shared. This is always a very meaningful service, and I think it's just so important that we share these things with one another, and I appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable. So we're going to move now into the ceremonial part of our service. So I invite you to just relax and get comfortable, and I'll let Denise get to the piano. And just to begin to open your heart to the memory of your loved ones who have passed, knowing that there may be sadness that comes up and that that's okay. It's a healthy part of the process. If you are remembering someone special today and you would like to receive a blessing or give them a special blessing, you can write their name on the blessing slip. And when we get to that point, when you come up to light your candle, you can put the blessing slip into the basket. You can go ahead and put there we go. Okay. So I'm going to light the first candle, which represents the past. In honoring the past, we call forth the powers of strength, wisdom, and love. We remember those we have loved and those we have lost. The loss of these loved ones may be fresh, or it may have been some time since they passed. But either way, we know that their absence is something we will carry with us forever. We may be experiencing intense grief, or our sadness may have mellowed into a dull ache. Whatever we are feeling, we hold our own tender hearts lovingly, and we gently make room for all of it. We take time to remember our dear ones, honoring them and the lives that they lived upon this earth, recalling each of their special contributions, and feeling gratitude for all that they gave to us and how they blessed our lives. And in turn, we now bless them. We hold our memories of them dear, and we remember them often. In the words of Unity's poet laureate, James Dillett Freeman, if I had never loved you, if I had never lain heart hearing heart beside you, I would not have this pain. I would not have this sorrow. I would not have this pain, but if I had not loved you, I would have lived in vain. I now light the second candle, which represents the present. In honoring the present, we call forth the powers of understanding, will, and order. Though our dear ones have moved on to the next adventure, we must learn how to live in the present without them. We walk the delicate balance between remembering them and letting go. We allow ourselves all the time we need to find our way through our grief. As time goes by, we continue to think of our dear ones. We light a candle, we set a place at the table, we tell stories, we take time to look at old photographs. We keep their memory alive and learn to live the new shape our life has taken. We learn to live ever more present in this now moment. As we learn to accept life on life's terms and we lean into that mystery, we find freedom. And we begin to feel joy bubbling up in ourselves and in our lives once again. From Native American tradition, I give you this one thought to keep. I am with you still, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the sweet, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not think of me as gone. I am with you still in each new dawn. And so now we light the third candle, which represents the future. In honoring the future, we call forth imagination, faith, and zeal. We allow hope to spring forth again and again, guiding our way forward. We trust in the universe's perfect plan for our lives. We hold fast to the truth that love never dies. It merely changes shape. We allow Spirit to guide us, and the love we feel for our dear ones keeps us moving ever forward. We let go of worry and concern, and we trust in what will be. And from Sri Chinmoy, death is not the end. Death can never be the end. Death is the road. Life is the traveler. The soul is the guide. So now I invite you to call forth into your mind that person that you are honoring today, and let us affirm the blessing on the slip. Let's affirm that together. I honor, remember, and bless my dear loved ones. And so now, as you are able and ready and willing, you can come forward and place your blessing slip in the basket. Take a candle, which you can light from any of these, and place in the bowl. honor, remember, and bless our dear loved ones. So just imagine those blessings going out into the universe to bless all of our dear ones and seeing us in return blessed by their memories. And let these beautiful lights symbolize each of their spirits and how they're still present here with us and our love goes on. So as we bring this ceremony to a close, we take a moment to just feel gratitude for the wisdom of these ancient rituals, gratitude for the Mexican perspective on death that has helped us to broaden our own understanding, and for this spiritual community which provides a safe, supportive space in which we can grieve. So I invite you now to just take a few more moments remembering your loved one, and then take their memory deep within, where you may keep it with you and cherish it always. And so it is. Amen.
We never know where life will take us. We know it's just a ride on the wheel. And we never know when death will shake us. And we don't know how it will feel. So goodbye, my friend. I know I'll never see you again, but the time together through all the years will take away the tears. It's okay now. Goodbye, my friend. Life's so fragile and love so pure. We can't hold on, but we try. We watch how quickly it disappears, and we'll never know why. But I'm okay now. Goodbye, my friend. You can go now. Goodbye, my friend.
Unity of Monterey Bay is the collective consciousness and commitment of all of us who give of our time, treasure, and talent in order to sustain this spiritual community that is dedicated to transforming lives. We know that prosperity is a state of mind that finds blessings in every situation and abundance in joyous generosity. We transform all appearance of fear or lack into a faith-filled peace of mind by shifting our attention to thoughts of gratitude for the abundance of God's good in our lives. And with our hearts and minds overflowing with gratitude, we breathe into the divine flow of God's good, trusting that we are enough, that we have enough, and that there always is enough to both have and to share. And again, we are grateful to all of you for your online giving through our website at unityofmontereybay.org and through your mailed-in offerings, including those who have set up giving through your banking institutions. We are truly blessed. For those of you here in person, the baskets are still in the back by the door for you to drop your offering as you leave this morning. And I'd like to add a little, this is our fifth Sunday. Once a quarter we have a fifth Sunday, which we refer to as our building Sunday. And we love our building, and it needs our little tender loving care. So if you feel so inclined and are able, we'd appreciate an additional offering to dedicate it, I guess, or earmark. That's the word. Thank you. Brain drain there for a minute. Earmarked for the building fund. We would be eternally grateful, as always. So now, from this place of faith and gratitude, I invite you to join me in mindful intention in joining in our offertory blessing. I am an open channel for God's infinite good. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies everything I give and everything I receive. I am both blessed and a blessing. Thank you, God.
So we want to thank the musicians.
Mike, no.
It says I'm on.
Oh, well. No. No. Do you want to just use this one?
Okay, well,
Yeah. Just go there.
we're just about done anyway. What's that? Plan B. So we want to thank the musicians whose music we use today, Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez and Carla Bonoff. And for also our awesome music team, Denise and Sue and John. And for announcements, we're just going to refer you to our e-blast for things that are coming up. And as we bring our service to a close this morning, we are so grateful that you have joined us, whether you're here live or joining us virtually. And whether it's your first time or you're a regular here, we hope we've made you feel at home in our Unity of Monterey Bay community. And we want you to know that wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. If you are here for your first time today, an usher will be happy to give you a welcoming packet on your way out so that you can have some information about our community and how you can stay in touch with us. Prayer chaplain on duty today is Robin. So Robin will be available after the service. She has a stole on, so you'll know who she is. And you are welcome to ask her for prayer needs or prayer joys to magnify them in consciousness. So we are grateful for her service. Okay, I think we're ready to form our closing circle for our prayer for protection and our peace song. I see a tail going down the aisle. What does that tail belong to? Ooh, scary. Very cute. So as always, as we form this closing circle, we just hold in our hearts all of those in our community, in our own lives, and around the world who are in need of prayer this morning, seeing this prayer going out to all of them and uplifting them as we join in our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the light of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.